This is the radio telescope from Honeysuckle Creek that received the first transmissions from Apollo 11, and now it has been rebuilt and relocated at the NASA Deep Space Network headquarters in Australia, just outside of Canberra. I had an opportunity to have a look at this piece of history yesterday, and it is these types of radio telescopes, these types of receivers that a lot of SETI experts feel is our best chance of finding alien intelligence, finding proof for extraterrestrial civilizations. But as many of us have realized lately, it may be objects passing through our own solar system that are the best bet for finding extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, ever since we discovered 3I Atlas, or rather, ever since 3I Atlas was first discovered, we actually saw 3I Atlas without realizing what it was in May, but the official discovery date was in July of this year. And since that time, we've looked for any evidence, any hint of what is called NGA, non-gravitational acceleration, any evidence that it might be speeding up or slowing down in a manner inconsistent with a natural object. And at last, we may have some evidence of that, both in terms of it slowing down and also in terms of it not changing or varying its speed or acceleration or trajectory at all, both of which would suggest that this is not a natural object, but rather something that was sent to us by design. All of this and more coming at you on The Angry Astronaut right now. Good afternoon, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to a very special bulletin here on The Angry Astronaut. So, is this the moment that we've all been waiting for? Is this the moment that 3I Atlas gives up its secrets and has demonstrated some sort of behavior, some sort of unnatural behavior that proves conclusively that it is an artificial object? Well, in my opinion, there's a lot of evidence that has just come out recently that, yes, strongly suggests that it might be an object under artificial control. We have a lot more now to suggest that that might be the case that we didn't have before. Now, does this include the object slowing down? Well, yes, I think that that's possible. And as much as you folks might think that I'm going to hold that particular question till the end, until you've had an opportunity to watch all the ads and everything on the video, that's not the case. I'm going to address that topic first, right after my presentation here on camera. But after that, we also need to talk about a recent paper that has come out about 3I Atlas's behavior since we first discovered it. Things about its maneuvering, or rather lack thereof, that suggest artificial control. Yes, as much as we'd like to think that it's slowing down, speeding up, something along those lines would be a dead giveaway for artificial control, just like in an Independence Day or something along those lines. The fact that it's not maneuvering, the fact that it's keeping a very steady course with no deviations whatsoever, that's just as artificial. And a paper that came out recently not only suggests, but actually proves that that is what's going on. Yes, 3I Atlas might be slowing down now, or it may have slowed down as it was entering the solar system. But at the moment, it's staying very close to its original speed and trajectory, not deviating at all in spite of what appears to be very visible outgassing. And that should be impossible. We have seen no evidence of this with any other comet, asteroid, or anything else in the history of astronomy. Again, I keep saying in the history of astronomy over and over again when we're talking about 3I Atlas, but let me tell you something, that is indeed the case with this object. If it is natural, it is one of the most bizarre and unusual natural objects that have ever been observed passing through our solar system, and it definitely warrants close inspection. But in my opinion, This recent evidence, especially this latest paper that just came out, suggests that 3I Atlas may indeed be here by design and under intelligent control. Okay, as promised, let's go ahead and address the first elephant in the room. Is 3I Atlas slowing down? Well, one thing that isn't talked about a whole lot in 3I Atlas articles in the mainstream media anyway, is the fact that we were actually watching this object all the way back to May of 2025. Of course, we didn't realize that we were watching it. We simply had it in our telescope images of the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS. During this time, we found 3I Atlas without realizing what it was and observed an object that increased in brightness by a factor of 5 times while it traveled a total distance of 0.9 astronomical units between May the 7th of 2025 and June the 3rd of 2025, a total of 28 days. This change in proximity alone would only account for an increase in brightness by a factor of 1.5 or so, not 5 times, assuming it's standard solar illumination. So additional mechanisms have to be responsible for this observed flux increase. Maybe. Or is it also possible that the object became this much brighter simply because it got a lot closer to us quicker than we thought it was? In other words, was it closing on us from an observational perspective faster than we thought? And this accounts for at least part of the strangely rapid increase in brightness. 5 times worth of brightness as opposed to only 1.5 is a massive difference. And although I acknowledge that some sort of active outgassing or sublimation is probably responsible for at least some of this brightness increase, at that colossal distance there shouldn't have been a lot of sublimation going on. So that being the case, why would the brightness have increased this much? Now, if it did close on us a lot faster than we thought, isn't this something that we would have observed? Wouldn't this be very obvious to us? Well, yes and no, because keep in mind, 3I Atlas was approaching our planet from a direction that corresponds to the galactic core. That is to say, where there is a huge concentration of stars. Such a high concentration that the background becomes very, very cluttered, making precise speed and trajectory estimates a lot more challenging at that distance. Granted, this is highly speculative here, a lot more speculative than what I'm going to be talking about later on in the video, but still, in my opinion, this is a possible explanation for this rapid increase in brightness while 3I Atlas was such a massive distance away from our sun. And keep in mind, when we're talking about these sorts of estimates, when we're talking about, that is to say, speed, location, etc., many of our models tend to throw out any results that fly in the face of what should be possible. In other words, if 3I Atlas were traveling, say, 3 times as fast as we thought it could be traveling at this distance, those results would automatically be thrown out by the computers and modeling systems before it even had an opportunity to be examined. So once again, given how rapid the brightness increased during this short amount of time, I tend to think that that could be a function of the object closing on us more rapidly than we thought possible, than just a sublimation, an increase in sublimation that should have been impossible from that kind of distance anyway. It's way too cold at a distance of 6.36 astronomical units from the sun for that much sublimation to be occurring. Another possibility could be some sort of braking thrusters being applied at that distance, once again indicating the 3I Atlas might be slowing down. Again, speculative, I'll admit, but when we combine it with all of the new discoveries that have been made recently, including this paper that I keep talking about when it comes to 3I Atlas's artificial-looking behavior, now I think that this theory becomes a lot more plausible. Okay, so If that were the case, is there any evidence that braking thrusters were being applied by 3I Atlas at any point since we started observing it? Well, yes and no. First of all, as far as spectrographic proof of any sort of active thrusters being applied by this object, recently, no, there is no evidence of any sort of anomalous materials in 3I Atlas's coma that would suggest active propulsion. However, 3I Atlas's velocity and trajectory has not changed since we started taking spectrographic analyses. Is there any evidence that perhaps braking thrust might have been applied in the past and then stopped, but there still might be some evidence of its past operation? Well, actually, yes, there is. The presence of nickel, strong spectrographic nickel evidence in the coma without any other metal being present suggests that there's something bizarre going on with this object. There is no precedent in nature whatsoever of nickel being present in a comet's coma without there being iron present also. As a matter of fact, the presence of nickel and iron is an unusual thing anyway, with only about 30 comets having been detected with these sorts of elements in its comets, and once again, none of these objects had pure nickel. However, keep in mind, although operational rocket engines do not produce nickel waste products from their fuel or consumption, rocket engines do use nickel-based super alloys for their strength and high temperature resistance, which can lead to wear and erosion of these components over time. Therefore, if these engines had been in operation a month or two perhaps prior to James Webb and other telescopes taking their spectrographic analyses, that's the point that we may have observed waste products from these engines. In other words, nickel waste products from these super alloys, and that would explain the presence of nickel without any other metals being present in the coma, because these types of super alloys don't have iron present. Generally, they'll have things like titanium and such present, but the types of materials that tend to get worn off as waste products are always pure nickel. All of this having been said, the strangest thing about 3I Atlas, at least as far as recent observations are concerned, have nothing to do with its non-gravitational acceleration or NGA, but rather its lack of NGA. This thing is maintaining a constant and steady course, day after day, month after month, completely unimpacted by what appears to be extremely obvious cometary outgassing. Once again, this is without precedent in nature, a very strange thing indeed. Now, Avi Loeb and a couple of co-authors put out a paper just a couple of days ago indicating just how extreme this anomaly actually is. If you examine 3I Atlas's course, speed, and trajectory from May 15th of 2025 to September 15th of 2025, you find that there is very little variation in its speed and trajectory. Tiny 10 to the minus 8th power astronomical units per day. Now, that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of you. Let me go ahead and break that down into more conventional measurements. 0.93 miles per day, or about 1.5 kilometers per day. That's the only variation that we're getting out of this object on a daily basis. That is utterly bizarre. That is the kind of variation that we would expect from an object that is experiencing no outgassing whatsoever. But 3I Atlas most definitely has a noticeable anti-tail, that is to say outgassing that appears to be spearing out towards the sun, as well as a more conventional tail that's been forming more recently. There is no way that that much outgassing should be producing this little variation in speed and trajectory, unless the object were utterly colossal. But even if that were the case, it still doesn't match up. Let me tell you what I'm talking about here. 10 to the minus 8th power astronomical units per day, as opposed to other comets' non-gravitational acceleration, is just really, really tiny. 2I Borisov, for example, the only confirmed interstellar comet that has passed through our solar system that we've observed anyway, had an NGA of 10 to the minus 6th astronomical units per day, 100 times as pronounced as 3I Atlas. 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, and I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing that, had a non-gravitational acceleration of about 10 to the minus 7th power astronomical units per day, 10 times more pronounced than 3I Atlas. And now Comet Hale-Bopp. And by the way, this was a huge comet that would require enormous amounts of cometary outgassing to get it to shift even a little bit, still had 10 times as much NGA as 3I Atlas. This suggests that either 3I Atlas is huge, enormous, even bigger maybe than Hale-Bopp, which makes no sense for an interstellar object. These sorts of objects should be unbelievably unusual. Or we're talking about an object that is maintaining its speed and trajectory artificially under intelligent control. So yeah, very strange indeed. Once again, to be clear, yes, the evidence as far as 3I Atlas slowing down is concerned is highly speculative, based just on brightening at an extreme distance and based on our lack of exacting calculations when we're talking about an object in a very busy background traveling at a high velocity and brightening quickly. That may suggest that it was closing on us faster than we thought. But again, that's pretty speculative. What is not speculative, however, is the total lack of NGA. And as we saw in the video, that is beyond bizarre. We've seen no evidence of any comet in the history of astronomy that's ever done this, or asteroid, or any other natural object. And here's another fascinating detail about this recent paper. Not only does it reveal just how unusual 3I Atlas is when it comes to its lack of NGA, non-gravitational acceleration, it also reveals just how bizarre Oumuamua was when it came to its incredible NGA. There are many things about Oumuamua that have led a variety of astronomers, and also myself, to believe that it might have been an artificial object. As a matter of fact, I think it was probably an artificial object for these reasons. Number one, it passed so close to the Earth, directly through the Goldilocks zone of our solar system. That's an unusual thing. It also tumbled at a very consistent rate, approximately 3 times per day, and that tumbling didn't change even when it was accelerating. This is impossible for a natural object, only possible for an artificial object that is maintaining its tumbling rate for some reason through artificial means. But finally, its acceleration as it left the solar system, that was bizarre in the extreme. At a distance of 1.4 astronomical units from the sun, near the closest approach to Earth, the NGA for Oumuamua was 2.5 times 10 to the negative 4th astronomical units per day. What does that mean? Well, in a feat that defies all natural precedent, this object that demonstrated no natural outgassing, no evidence, no visible signs that it might be accelerating through natural means, still accelerated at a rate of 37,500 kilometers per day off its predicted trajectory, until it was hundreds of thousands of kilometers further out of the solar system than it should have been in the space of just a few weeks. This is something that should be impossible for any natural object, and now we can see that with other precedents in nature, other comets that had visible outgassing, that had extremely obvious means of natural propulsion, and yet still couldn't come close to matching Oumuamua's acceleration. For example, 2I Borisov, a comet that demonstrated extreme outgassing, very obvious and visible outgassing through its passage through the solar system, accelerated at a rate of 10 to the -6th astronomical units per day. So instead of tens of thousands of kilometers out of trajectory on a daily basis, 2I Borisov deviated a mere 150 kilometers per day off its trajectory, and that is a typical NGA statistic for a comet. It's actually at the upper end of what comets are capable of, and yet astronomers expect us to believe that through some sort of mysterious invisible outgassing, Oumuamua was somehow able to naturally accelerate tens or hundreds or even thousands of times faster than comets are able to do with natural visible outgassing. An absolutely ridiculous notion, and something that becomes really, really apparent when you look at the hard numbers. Two objects, two anomalies that suggest artificial control. A lack of NGA indicating, again, intelligent control, maneuvering thrusters, keeping it on course in the case of 3I Atlas. And once again, even if that's not the case, it suggests an object that is so huge as to be virtually impossible given how infrequent interstellar objects seem to be. And then Oumuamua, an object that demonstrated no visible outgassing whatsoever, none of any kind, and yet maneuvered 100 times more in terms of NGA than most comets, including the only confirmed interstellar comet that we are aware of, which is 2I Borisov. In both cases, very, very strange anomalies that suggest artificial control, and that's just a couple of anomalies out of so many with these interstellar objects. And as more of these objects pass through our solar system, as our improved capabilities, especially with the Vera Rubin Space Telescope, for example, and others reveal more of these bizarre objects to us, it will become more and more clear to us, in my opinion, which of them are natural and which of them are obviously artificial. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and please consider supporting me on Patreon. As you may have noticed recently, the way to see these kinds of videos early is to be a Patreon supporter. I also have exclusive videos for Patreon supporters. You can join for as little as $3 a month. All the details are in the description, and of course, this allows me to travel the world and bring you some unique content, such as the interview that I brought you about the UFO event in Melbourne in 1966, and also some really exciting stuff coming up from interviews that I've carried out in recent days. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.